I watched my HOA president's BMW disappear into the earth like it was swallowed by quicksand. Turns out I'm pretty good at making things disappear. 6 hours earlier, I'm standing at my busted ranch gate in work boots and diesel-stained clothes, staring at fresh tire tracks carved through my cattle pasture. Chains snapped clean through with bolt cutters. Again, Delilah Thornwick thought owning the biggest house in Willowbrook Estates gave her the right to use my 40-acre ranch as her personal shortcut. What she didn't know, I'd been digging something special just for her. When someone keeps driving where they shouldn't, sometimes the ground fights back. This story starts with trespassing, involves some creative landscaping, and ends with a trap she never saw coming. What would you do if your neighbor treated your property like their personal highway? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I bet your HOA has horror stories too. Let me back up and tell you how a simple gate turned into the spectacular downfall of the most powerful woman in Willowbrook Estates. My name's Jake Riverside, and I'm what happens when you cross an industrial electrician with a third-generation cattle rancher. By day, I'm the guy who keeps the lights on in Austin's commercial buildings. Nights and weekends, I'm trying to keep my family's 40-acre ranch from becoming another strip mall. Lost my wife Sarah to cancer 18 months back. The kids scattered to Dallas and Houston for their careers, leaving me alone with 40 acres, 30 head of cattle, and enough stubborn pride to choke a mule. The ranch bleeds money like a punctured artery. Medical bills will do that to you. That's why I keep pulling 12-hour electrical shifts, literally keeping the lights on while figuratively keeping my head above water. Here's where geography becomes destiny. Our ranch sits smack between the Old County Road and Willowbrook Estates, Austin's newest monument to McMansion excess. Developers turned surrounding farmland into a subdivision where houses start at $800,000 and the HOA fees cost more than most people's car payments. My cattle gate has occupied the exact same spot since Eisenhower was president. Grandpa installed it in 1962, Daddy maintained it, and now it's mine to protect. Just weathered wood and metal hinges, but it represents something these new neighbors fundamentally don't understand. Property rights aren't negotiable. That gate provides a convenient 3-minute shortcut from their manicured paradise to the highway. Why navigate actual subdivision streets when you can blast through my property like you own it? Enter Delilah Thornwick, HOA president, self-appointed neighborhood dictator, and living proof that money can't buy class. 48 years old, drives a BMW X7 worth more than I've made in the past 2 years combined. Lives in a 6,000 square foot temple to conspicuous consumption, complete with marble everything and a husband who trades other people's money for a living. Delilah's neighborhood reign of terror is legendary. She measures grass with an actual ruler and files violations for quarter-inch infractions. Last year, she forced an elderly widow to repaint her mailbox because the white was allegedly too beige. The year before, she made a disabled veteran remove his flagpole for being 6 inches over regulation height. But here's what really reveals Delilah's character. Watch how she treats service workers, snaps fingers at waitresses like summoning dogs, ignores grocery clerks completely, talks to delivery drivers like they're malfunctioning appliances. Classic entitled rich person behavior. Invisible people exist only to serve her convenience. 6 months ago, I caught her red-handed. Coming home from 14 hours rewiring a warehouse in brutal Texas heat, I found my gate hanging open like a broken jaw. Fresh BMW tire tracks carved through my pasture like automotive graffiti. My cattle huddled in the corner, spooked and confused. Next morning, I approached her mailbox with the patience of a saint and the diplomacy of a career electrician, which is to say, direct but respectful. Ma'am, someone's been using my ranch gate as a shortcut. That's private property and it's disturbing my livestock. The look she shot me could have flash frozen the Rio Grande. Pure aristocratic disdain, like a peasant had dared address the queen without genuflecting first. That old gate was practically falling apart anyway, she sniffed, not bothering to look up from her mail. Maybe if you actually maintained this eyesore properly, people wouldn't need to worry about it breaking down. She slid into that pristine BMW and drove off, leaving me standing there like an idiot holding an invisible hat. The gravel crunched differently under my work boots that morning. Sharper, angrier. Sweet hay smell in my pasture now carried the bitter tang of diesel exhaust. Running my calloused hands over the weathered gatewood, I could feel 60 years of honest work meeting 21st century entitlement. In the distance, cattle still lowed nervously, sensing change in the air. That's the moment I realized this wouldn't end with neighborly conversation. But Delilah had no idea she'd just picked a fight with someone who troubleshoots electrical problems for a living. And brother, she was about to become my most challenging diagnostic case yet. See, there's something about working with electricity that teaches you patience, planning, and the beautiful art of consequences. 2 days later, I installed a heavy-duty chain and commercial-grade padlock on my gate. The kind they use on construction sites. Thick steel links that would make a burglar think twice. Cost me $43 at the hardware store, but seemed like a reasonable investment in basic property rights education. Should have known Delilah Thornwick didn't believe in reasonable. Came home the next evening to find my shiny new chain scattered across the gravel like metallic confetti. The padlock? Sitting at the bottom of my cattle pond like an expensive paperweight. Fresh BMW tracks carved even deeper into my pasture, this time with extra malice. She'd floored it through the soft earth, leaving twin gouges that looked like automotive gang signs. But here's where Delilah made her first strategic blunder. She didn't know about my security cameras. When you wire commercial buildings for 15 years, you pick up surveillance system knowledge along the way. I'd installed discrete cameras months earlier after some equipment mysteriously wandered off. Nothing Hollywood fancy, just good enough to catch faces and license plates in broad daylight. The footage was absolutely beautiful. 6:17 a.m., there's Delilah in designer workout gear, wielding industrial bolt cutters like some kind of suburban ninja. These weren't your basic household wire snips either. She'd clearly upgraded to serious metal-cutting artillery. The woman came prepared for war. I was admiring her technique when the real surprise knocked on my door 2 days later. County inspector, clipboard in hand, official notice in the other. Apparently, my gate violated easement regulations and was blocking a historical right-of-way established before I owned the property. "Sir, this gate needs to come down entirely," he announced, consulting his paperwork like Moses reading commandments. "We have documentation showing this easement was legally established in 1974. He handed me a photocopied survey map that looked official at first glance. But 15 years of reading electrical blueprints teaches you to spot forgeries. Wrong ink aging, mismatched typography, and the clincher, a signature from a surveyor who'd been dead since 1971. I'd actually worked on his son's electrical system years back and remembered the family history. "Mind if I get a copy to review?" I asked, secretly photographing everything while playing confused rancher. "Sure thing, but the removal order stands." After he left, I spent my lunch break diving into courthouse basement records. The place smelled like old paper and forgotten lawsuits, photocopier scratching away like an arthritic cricket. Found exactly what I expected. My original 1962 deed explicitly mentioning the private gate, plus documents proving Delilah's survey was pure creative writing. Now, I'd read enough legal cases during my divorce years back to know that filing false government reports in Texas carries some serious weight. We're talking Class B misdemeanor territory, up to $2,000 fines and 6 months of county hospitality. The trick is building an airtight paper trail that even lazy prosecutors can't ignore. I filed my counter-complaint the next morning, armed with original documentation and forgery evidence. Same inspector returned 3 days later looking like someone had kicked his dog. "Mr. Riverside, I owe you an apology. We reviewed your materials and you're absolutely right. That survey was questionable at best. We're dropping the violation and issuing warnings about false complaints." Turned out to be decent folk once he saw legitimate paperwork. Built like a scarecrow with a government clipboard, but honest. Mentioned that Delilah wasn't the first HOA president to try creative legal interpretation, just the most obvious about it. The beauty of electrical work is that it teaches systematic thinking. You trace circuits methodically, test each connection, document every finding. Delilah's opening gambit had been pure caveman tactics, bolt cutters and fake documents, but she'd revealed her strategy: escalate to illegal methods when legal ones fail. 2 weeks later, she proved my analysis spot on. 4 certified letters arrived the same day like bureaucratic Christmas morning. Health department, fire marshal, animal control, building inspections, each claiming my ranch posed significant public safety concerns, requiring immediate investigation. The complaints read like they'd been copy-pasted from the same template, which probably wasn't far from the truth. Each inspection meant $200 plus lost work time. But Delilah had miscalculated something crucial about blue-collar life. We actually know the people who keep this county running. When you've done electrical work in every government building for 15 years, you build relationships with folks who matter. Fire Inspector Rodriguez pulled me aside after his walkthrough, the clean smell of my pre-inspection disinfectant still hanging in the air. Jake, I've seen this harassment pattern before. These complaints are obviously coordinated, same computer, same phrases, filed simultaneously. You should document everything for legal purposes because this lady's playing games with the system. My ranch passed every single inspection with flying colors, but I was beginning to understand Delilah's endgame. She wasn't trying to win legitimately, she was weaponizing government bureaucracy to drain my time, money, and patience until I surrendered. Classic entitled rich person warfare. If you can't buy what you want, bury your opponent in paperwork until they wave the white flag. But she'd made one fundamental miscalculation about Jake Riverside. I don't wave flags. I plant them. 3 weeks into our property rights war, Delilah decided to weaponize democracy itself. Because apparently when bolt cutters and forged documents fail, the next logical escalation is forming your own personal army of concerned citizens. She called it the Neighborhood Safety Committee. Sounds as harmless as a church potluck until you realize it's actually the Destroy Jake Riverside Coalition with better PR. Within days, I was drowning in complaint letters from every government agency in Central Texas, all expressing grave concern about my supposedly dangerous ranch operation. According to Delilah's fiction workshop, my property harbored potentially rabid wildlife, my sleepy cattle, stored unsecured hazardous chemicals, my lawnmower gas can, and posed imminent threats to community safety, my gate that wouldn't let her drive through. One particularly creative complaint claimed I was operating an illegal junkyard, which came as shocking news since my biggest piece of equipment is a Ford pickup old enough to vote. The real genius was her signature collection strategy. Every complaint came with 3 or 4 HOA board member signatures, people who'd never set foot on my land but were apparently deeply concerned about my cattle's mental health. The language was so identical across agencies that they'd obviously used the same word template, probably downloaded from howtoharassyourneighbors.com. But here's where Delilah revealed her master plan: financial warfare through bureaucratic carpet bombing. 4 different agencies, each demanding separate inspections at $200 minimum, all scheduled for the same week. Health department wanted to examine my cattle systems, water quality, and waste management. Fire marshal needed structural surveys and electrical compliance reviews. Animal control demanded vaccination records and behavioral assessments. Building inspections required code reviews and environmental impact studies. Quick math, 8 inspections times $200 each, plus lost wages from mandatory time off work. Delilah was launching a $2,000 plus financial missile designed to crater my bank account while keeping her own hands legally clean. She'd made one crucial miscalculation, though. She was fighting someone who actually knows these people. When you've run electrical wire through every government building in the county for 15 years, inspectors aren't faceless bureaucrats. They're neighbors. Rodriguez from Fire Inspection has been to every job site I've worked. Jenkins from Health Department invited me to his daughter's wedding. Even Murphy from Animal Control looks like he bench presses pickup trucks but has the heart of a teddy bear. The inspections became almost comical theater. Rodriguez walked my property like he was visiting family, checking boxes while we discussed his wife's arthritis. Jenkins spent more time admiring my cattle than examining imaginary violations, the morning air crisp with hay smell and fresh coffee from his thermos. Jake, I gotta ask about this potentially rabid wildlife complaint, Murphy said, scratching his head while watching my cattle graze peacefully. You hiding any dangerous animals out here? Well, there's Bessie. I pointed to my oldest cow, currently napping under an oak tree. She gets pretty cranky when you wake her up during afternoon nap time. Murphy actually snorted. Yeah, I can see the public safety crisis. The lady who filed this, she ever been on your property legitimately? Only when she's ramming through my gate like she owns the place. That explains the creative writing. I've seen harassment campaigns before, but this is almost artistic in its desperation. Every inspection came back cleaner than a church floor on Easter Sunday. My ranch didn't just meet safety standards. It exceeded them by margins that made the inspectors shake their heads in amazement. The breakthrough moment came when Jenkins pulled me aside after his walkthrough, steam rising from his coffee cup in the cool morning air. Jake, I need to be straight with you. These complaints are textbook coordinated harassment. Same templates, identical filing dates, exaggerated language that screams legal retaliation. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. I dealt with similar cases during my divorce years back. Texas property code allows recovery of attorney fees and damages when people file frivolous complaints in bad faith. The documentation practically builds itself when they're this obvious about it. That evening, I sat on my porch listening to cattle breathing peacefully in the darkness, the rough wood of my rocking chair creaking steadily as I reviewed the day's clean inspection reports. The sweet smell of night-blooming jasmine mixed with distant diesel exhaust from the highway, reminding me how this whole mess started. Delilah had escalated from simple trespassing to full-scale legal warfare, thinking she could overwhelm a simple rancher with bureaucratic firepower. But she'd made a fundamental error. She was fighting someone who solves electrical problems for a living, and lady, you just became my most interesting diagnostic challenge. She wanted to play games with government agencies? Perfect. Time to show her what happens when you try to short-circuit someone who actually understands how the system works. The meter was running, and Delilah Thornwick was about to get a very expensive education in consequences. 2 weeks after my clean inspection sweep, Delilah decided to go nuclear. When government harassment fails, apparently the next step in the entitled rich person playbook is economic warfare through social connections. Her husband Garrison, investment banker extraordinaire and professional destroyer of other people's dreams, made a personal visit to my boss at Kowalski Electric, not a phone call, mind you. An actual office visit in his $1,000 suit and imported Italian shoes, looking like he'd stepped out of a Wall Street movie. Tommy Kowalski called me that afternoon while I was rewiring a downtown office building, the familiar smell of heated electrical wire mixing with construction dust. "Jake, we need to talk. Had an interesting visitor today." When I got to the shop, Tommy was pacing behind his desk like a caged tiger, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled anger. "That banker husband of your HOA nightmare showed up here today," Tommy said, his Boston accent thickening with irritation. "Garrison something or other told me you were mentally unstable and threatening property values in their neighborhood. Said I should consider whether having you represent my company was good for business relationships." The mini twist hit me like a voltage surge. Garrison wasn't just making vague threats. He'd done his homework. "He mentioned 3 specific commercial contracts we're bidding on," Tommy continued, "projects where his investment firm has connections to the property developers." The message was crystal clear. Fire Jake Riverside, or Kowalski Electric might find itself struggling to win future bids. But here's where Delilah and Garrison made their biggest miscalculation yet. They'd picked the wrong target for intimidation. Tommy Kowalski built his electrical contracting business from nothing, starting in a garage with a pickup truck and enough determination to power half of Austin. He's the kind of guy who'll work 20-hour days to meet a deadline, but won't compromise his principles for any amount of money. "You know what really pisses me off about this whole thing?" Tommy asked, settling into his chair. "That pompous ass acted like I was some small-time operation he could push around. Then he made the mistake of getting specific about his connections. Turns out, Garrison had tried pulling similar strings before. 3 years ago, he'd pressured Tommy to approve substandard electrical inspections on a luxury condo project his firm was financing. When Tommy refused to compromise safety standards, Garrison had tried to get him blacklisted from city contracts. "The funny thing about guys like Garrison," Tommy said with a grim smile, "is they think everyone's for sale. They can't comprehend someone who values integrity over income." Tommy's warning came with some unsoliciting intelligence. The Thornwick family had dirty money connections throughout Austin's development scene. Garrison's investment firm specialized in real estate schemes that skirted legal boundaries, and Delilah's HOA presidency was apparently part of a larger pattern of using official positions to benefit their financial interests. That afternoon, I documented every detail of the workplace intimidation attempt, knowing that employment retaliation for asserting property rights carries serious legal weight in Texas. I'd learned during my divorce proceedings that damages can include lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive awards designed to discourage future harassment. But I also started thinking beyond defensive measures. If Delilah and Garrison were this desperate to silence me, there had to be bigger secrets worth protecting. I installed additional security cameras around my ranch perimeter, upgrading to professional-grade equipment with night vision and remote monitoring. Every trespassing incident, every act of vandalism, every threatening gesture was now being recorded in high-definition quality with timestamps and GPS coordinates. My detailed incident log was growing into a prosecutor's dream case. But the real breakthrough came when I started researching HOA financial records more seriously. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly HOA treasurer, had been quietly documenting discrepancies for months. She'd noticed missing funds, unexplained expenditures, and board meeting minutes that didn't match her financial records. But as an 80-year-old widow living alone, she'd been too intimidated to speak up against Delilah's iron-fisted leadership. When I approached her with my own evidence of harassment, she practically broke down with relief. "I've been keeping copies of everything," she whispered over coffee in her immaculate kitchen, the ticking of her antique clock marking time like a countdown. The pool repair that never happened, the landscaping funds that disappeared, the dues payments that went to unauthorized accounts. But Delilah controls the board meetings, and I was afraid no one would believe me. Together, we discovered the shocking truth. Delilah had been systematically embezzling from HOA funds for over 18 months. We're talking about $240,000 in missing community money, funneled through fake contractors and non-existent service agreements directly into accounts she controlled. Her desperate need to use my ranch as a shortcut suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just saving 3 minutes of drive time, she was avoiding toll roads to conserve cash while her house teetered on the edge of foreclosure. The metallic taste of stress mixed with the bitter coffee as Mrs. Patterson showed me bank statements that painted a picture of financial desperation disguised as neighborhood authority. Delilah Thornwick wasn't just an entitled HOA president. She was a desperate embezzler whose entire lifestyle was built on stolen community funds, and my property rights fight had accidentally uncovered the biggest fraud scandal in Willowbrook Estates history. Game changer. That night, sitting in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen surrounded by boxes of financial documents, I realized I'd stumbled into something much bigger than a property dispute. What started as a simple trespassing problem had uncovered the financial crime of the decade in Willowbrook Estates. The evidence was overwhelming and methodical. Delilah hadn't just stolen money. She'd created an entire shadow economy within the HOA, complete with fake vendors, phantom service agreements, and forged board approvals. Mrs. Patterson's meticulous record-keeping had documented every discrepancy, every suspicious transaction, every red flag that screamed embezzlement. "Look at this," Mrs. Patterson said, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly as she pointed to a bank statement. "The pool maintenance contract shows $15,000 paid to Aquatic Solutions LLC last quarter, but I called every pool company in Austin. None of them have heard of this business. I ran the company name through online business registries. Aquatic Solutions LLC was registered to a P.O. box with Delilah Thornwick listed as the registered agent. She'd literally created fake companies to steal from her own neighbors. The pattern was everywhere once you knew what to look for. Landscaping services that never materialized, security upgrades that existed only on paper, community event expenses for parties that were never thrown. Every invoice was professionally formatted, every expense seemingly legitimate, every theft disguised as community improvement. She's been skimming about $12,000 per month for the past 18 months, I calculated, running numbers on Mrs. Patterson's calculator. That's roughly $240,000 in total theft, all hidden through fake vendor payments and inflated service contracts. But the most damning evidence was what Mrs. Patterson called her smoking gun folder. Bank records showing direct transfers from HOA accounts to Delilah's personal mortgage payments. She hadn't even bothered hiding some of the theft, apparently confident that her iron control over board meetings would prevent anyone from asking uncomfortable questions. I started keeping backup records when she refused to let me present detailed financial reports at meetings, Mrs. Patterson explained. She'd always cut me off, saying homeowners didn't need to see boring accounting details. Now I know why. The timeline painted a picture of escalating desperation. Delilah's theft had accelerated dramatically over the past 6 months, coinciding exactly with when her trespassing through my ranch had become more aggressive. She wasn't just avoiding a 3-minute detour. She was conserving every penny while her financial house of cards collapsed around her. Her $800,000 house was actually 3 months behind on mortgage payments. The white BMW was leased, not owned, and 2 payments overdue. Even her husband's investment firm was under SEC investigation for questionable real estate practices, though that was sealed information Mrs. Patterson had gleaned from her late husband's former law partner. She's been living on borrowed time and stolen money, I realized, staring at the mountain of evidence. Every dollar she steals buys her another month before the foreclosure hammer falls. This revelation completely changed the power dynamic. Delilah wasn't just an entitled neighbor abusing her HOA position, she was a desperate criminal whose entire lifestyle depended on continued theft from people who trusted her with their community funds. But here's what really made my electrician brain start calculating. She didn't know that I knew. In her mind, I was still just a stubborn rancher fighting about gate access. She had no idea that her harassment campaign had accidentally led me to uncover her entire criminal enterprise. Mrs. Patterson looked at me across her kitchen table, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. "What do we do now, Jake?" I smiled, feeling the familiar satisfaction of solving a complex electrical problem. "Now we set a trap that catches more than just a trespasser. We're going to give Delilah exactly what she deserves, a front row seat to the consequences of her choices." The sweet smell of Mrs. Patterson's chamomile tea mixed with the musty odor of old financial documents as we began planning the downfall of Willowbrook Estate's most corrupt HOA president. Justice was about to get very creative. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Not because I was actually sick, but because I had a more important job to do, building the most elaborate trap in Willowbrook Estate's history. My kitchen table looked like a war room by noon. Mrs. Patterson had brought every financial document she'd been secretly copying for 18 months. My son Michael drove down from Austin with a briefcase full of legal research about HOA fraud prosecutions. Tommy Kowalski showed up with contractor connections and a genuine desire to see entitled rich people face consequences. "All right," Michael said, spreading legal documents across my table like battle plans. "Here's what we're dealing with. In Texas, HOA embezzlement over $30,000 is a second-degree felony carrying 2 to 20 years in prison. With $240,000 missing, Delilah's looking at serious time. But catching her legally was only half the plan. I wanted her to experience the same helplessness she'd been inflicting on me for months. That's where my engineering background became crucial." While Michael coordinated with County Attorney Williams about criminal prosecution, I started designing something special for Delilah's next uninvited visit to my ranch. The physical trap required precision planning. I'd been thinking about this for weeks, running calculations on soil density, vehicle weight distribution, and deceleration forces. What I needed was a pit deep enough to stop a BMW but shallow enough to avoid serious injury, about 6 feet deep with sloped sides for easy extraction. Tommy's excavation contacts owed him favors from previous electrical jobs. Within 2 days, I had a crew digging what appeared to be a drainage improvement project near my gate. The official story was foundation work for a new cattle guard, completely legal and actually useful for ranch operations. The engineering was more complex than it looked. I calculated the exact weight threshold for a BMW X7, roughly 5,400 pounds, and designed a false surface that would support lighter vehicles but collapse under Delilah's specific car. Plywood reinforcement with strategically placed weak points, covered with authentic-looking gravel and dirt. But the real genius was the anti-vehicle system underneath. I installed retractable steel posts activated by weight sensors, creating a secondary barrier that would prevent any vehicle from escaping once it dropped into the pit. My electrical expertise came in handy for the sensor network, hidden triggers that would activate cameras, emergency notifications, and the steel post deployment. Safety was paramount because the last thing I needed was a wrongful injury lawsuit. I installed an emergency ladder disguised as a drainage pipe, placed a first aid kit in a weatherproof container within easy reach, and programmed the system to automatically notify emergency services if triggered. Fire Inspector Rodriguez unofficially consulted on safety protocols during his off hours. "Jake, Texas Property Code 75.001 allows reasonable force to protect property from criminal trespass," he explained over beers at my kitchen table. "The key word is reasonable. Your setup needs to stop intrusion without causing permanent harm." The legal coordination was equally complex. County Attorney Williams agreed to have sheriff's deputies positioned nearby during the next HOA meeting, ostensibly for community safety during public discussions of financial irregularities. Mrs. Patterson would present just enough embezzlement evidence to panic Delilah into attempting one final escape through my ranch. Meanwhile, I prepared what Michael called the nuclear option, a complete financial audit report documenting every stolen dollar, every fake vendor, every forged signature. We had enough evidence to not only convict Delilah criminally, but to pursue civil recovery of 3 times the stolen amount under Texas fraud statutes. The timing had to be perfect. We scheduled an emergency HOA meeting for Thursday evening, giving Delilah exactly 1 chance to use my ranch shortcut before the financial evidence went public. I tested the trap system 12 times with different weight loads, ensuring consistent activation and safe deceleration. Buck Morrison, the private investigator Delilah had hired and then stiffed, provided the final piece of intelligence. She was planning to flee Austin immediately after transferring the last remaining HOA funds to an offshore account. Her house was already listed with a discount realtor, and Garrison had liquidated most of their joint assets. "She's desperate and running out of time," Buck reported. "Thursday night might be your only shot at catching her red-handed with both the trespassing and the money trail." The sound of my excavator's diesel engine had been rumbling across the ranch for days, creating the perfect cover story for my trap construction. The smell of fresh earth and welding metal filled the air as we put finishing touches on what would soon become Delilah's very expensive lesson in property rights. Mrs. Patterson smiled as she watched me test the camera angles one final time. My late husband always said, the best traps are the ones people walk into willingly. By Wednesday evening, everything was ready. Hidden cameras positioned for perfect documentation, emergency services on standby, legal evidence prepared for immediate presentation, and one very sophisticated hole in the ground waiting for an entitled BMW driver who'd finally run out of shortcuts. Delilah Thornwick had spent months making my life difficult. Time to return the favor with interest. Thursday morning brought desperation disguised as confidence. Delilah launched what could only be described as a scorched earth campaign, apparently believing that if she couldn't steal her way out of trouble, she'd intimidate her way to freedom. First came the attempted bribery of county officials. Inspector Rodriguez called me around noon, his voice tight with professional anger. "Jake, you're not going to believe this. That Thornwick woman just offered me $5,000 cash to condemn your ranch for structural safety violations. Had the nerve to suggest my own electrical inspection was insufficient and that a more thorough review might find serious code problems." The beautiful thing about trying to bribe government workers in Texas is that it's automatically a felony, and Rodriguez had recorded the entire conversation on his phone. Delilah had just handed us another criminal charge while simultaneously proving her desperation level had reached critical mass. But she wasn't done making terrible decisions. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson called in tears. "Jake, she's hired some private investigator to dig through your personal finances. He was asking my neighbors about your work history, your late wife's medical bills, even questioning whether you're mentally stable after losing Sarah." The mini twist came when I realized the investigator was Buck Morrison, the same guy Delilah had already stiffed on previous fees. Buck called me directly 20 minutes later. "Mr. Riverside? This is Buck Morrison, licensed private investigator. I need to inform you that Delilah Thornwick hired me to find compromising information about you, but she's refused to pay my invoices for 3 weeks running." His gravelly voice carried the satisfaction of a man about to enjoy some professional revenge. "I thought you might be interested in what I've actually discovered during my investigation." Buck had been conducting surveillance on Delilah instead of me, documenting her increasingly erratic behavior. Bank visits at odd hours, meetings with shady financial advisors, and frantic phone calls to real estate agents about emergency property sales. She was liquidating everything she could get her hands on, preparing for a quick escape from Austin. "She's planning to transfer the remaining HOA funds to an offshore account tomorrow morning," Buck revealed. "Then she's driving straight to Houston to catch a flight to the Cayman Islands. Her husband's already there, supposedly on business, but my contacts say he's setting up residence." The timing was perfect. Delilah would attend tonight's emergency HOA meeting, try to deflect the financial questions, then attempt one final theft before fleeing the country. My ranch gate represented her last shortcut to freedom, and her first step into consequences. Meanwhile, the harassment at my ranch had escalated to outright vandalism. Delilah's teenage son and his friends had been caught on camera spray painting threats on my barn, "Move away or else," in red letters that looked like a horror movie prop. They'd also slashed my truck tires and attempted to poison my cattle's water supply, though my security system had caught them in the act. The acrid smell of spray paint still hung in the morning air as I documented the fresh vandalism, adding it to my growing evidence file. These weren't pranks, they were intimidation tactics designed to force me off my own property. But the real revelation came when Buck showed me surveillance photos of Delilah meeting with Marcus Webb, a known loan shark who operated out of downtown Austin's seedier establishments. She borrowed $50,000 from Webb 2 weeks ago, Buck explained, showing me telephoto images of the money exchange. Problem is, Webb's not known for flexible repayment terms. She's got until Friday to pay him back, or things get unpleasant fast. The woman wasn't just facing embezzlement charges and civil lawsuits. She'd borrowed money from criminals to fund her escape plan. If she didn't make it out of Austin by tomorrow night, she'd have much bigger problems than trespassing violations. Everything was converging on tonight's HOA meeting like a perfectly timed electrical circuit. County Attorney Williams had positioned deputies nearby for community safety during financial discussions. Mrs. Patterson would present just enough embezzlement evidence to panic Delilah without revealing our full investigation. Buck Morrison would provide real-time intelligence on her movements. And 6 feet below my ranch gate, a perfectly engineered pit waited with the patience of gravity itself. My final preparations included testing the weight sensors one last time, ensuring the emergency ladder was properly concealed, and programming the camera system for optimal evidence collection. The mechanical click of cameras focusing mixed with the electronic hum of sensor systems coming online. Tommy stopped by around sunset to review safety protocols one final time. You know, Jake, in 30 years of electrical work, I've never seen a more elaborate troubleshooting operation. The sweet smell of evening hay mixed with the metallic scent of fresh-turned earth around my trap as we watched the sun set over what would soon become the most expensive shortcut in Texas history. Delilah Thornwick had spent months making my life miserable. In about 3 hours, she was going to discover that some people fight back with engineering precision and the patience of a man who's learned that the best solutions come to those who plan carefully. Time to close the circuit. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m., but Delilah's final desperate gambit started much earlier. Around 3 that afternoon, she made her last-ditch attempt to control the narrative through pure financial intimidation. She showed up at my ranch unannounced, driving that pristine white BMW like she owned the place, which I suppose she thought she did. I watched from my kitchen window as she climbed out wearing what probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Designer everything, diamond jewelry that caught the afternoon sun like warning signals. The woman actually had the audacity to knock on my front door. "Mr. Riverside," she said when I answered, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I'd like to propose a mutually beneficial solution to our little disagreement." She opened a leather portfolio and pulled out a cashier's check for $50,000. $50,000, sitting there like a golden ticket, made out to Jake Riverside with a memo line that read, "Property Easement Agreement." "This should more than compensate you for any inconvenience," she continued, clearly expecting me to grab the money like a starving dog. "All I need is a simple easement agreement allowing neighborhood access through your gate. Nothing complicated, just a formalization of existing usage patterns." The mini twist was beautiful in its desperation. She was literally trying to buy legitimacy for her trespassing while simultaneously attempting to silence me about her embezzlement. Buck Morrison's hidden recording equipment captured every word, every gesture, every incriminating statement. "That's very generous," I said, playing along while the cameras rolled. "But I'm curious, where does an HOA president get $50,000 in cash for easement purchases? That seems like it would require board approval and community voting." Her plastic smile flickered like a fluorescent bulb about to burn out. "Well, sometimes presidents need to make executive decisions for community benefit. The funds come from our discretionary community improvement budget." "Discretionary budget," I repeated, knowing full well that Mrs. Patterson's records showed no such fund existed. "And this improvement budget, that's separate from the pool maintenance funds, the landscaping allocations, the security upgrade expenses?" Each question hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't expected a simple rancher to know anything about HOA financial structures, and my knowledge was clearly terrifying her. "Look, Mr. Riverside," she said, dropping the fake politeness. "I'm offering you more money than you'll see in 2 years of your little electrical jobs. Take the deal and everyone wins. Refuse it, and you might find life in this neighborhood becomes very uncomfortable." Buck's recording equipment captured that threat perfectly, adding extortion to her growing list of criminal charges. "I'll need to think about it," I said. "Maybe we can discuss it after tonight's meeting." Her face went pale. What meeting? The emergency HOA meeting Mrs. Patterson called to discuss financial irregularities in community accounts. Didn't you get the notice? The woman looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She knew exactly what Mrs. Patterson had discovered, and she knew her time was running out faster than water through a broken dam. After she left, Buck emerged from his concealed position near my barn, grinning like Christmas morning. Beautiful work, Jake. She just confessed to misappropriating HOA funds, attempted bribery, and threatened extortion, all on high-definition video with crystal-clear audio. He checked his equipment. This footage will make the district attorney's job embarrassingly easy. But Delilah wasn't finished making catastrophic decisions. Around 6 p.m., just as community members were arriving for the meeting, she made one final play for control. She called the local newspaper claiming that a mentally unstable neighbor was threatening community safety and that tonight's meeting was actually an emergency intervention to address my dangerous behavior. The reporter who took her call happened to be Jenkins's nephew, the same Jenkins who'd inspected my ranch and found it cleaner than most commercial facilities. Within minutes, I had inside information about her media manipulation attempt. She's trying to flip the narrative, the reporter warned me over the phone. Paint herself as the victim and you as the aggressor. But don't worry, I've already talked to my uncle about your situation. We know who the real problem is here. By 6:30, the community center was packed with over 200 residents, local media representatives, and county officials who'd gotten wind of the embezzlement allegations. The air inside was thick with nervous energy and the smell of too many people in an enclosed space. Sheriff's deputies had positioned themselves strategically around the building, officially for community safety during financial discussions, but actually to prevent Delilah from fleeing when the evidence was presented. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row clutching her folder of financial documents, looking like David preparing to face Goliath with a slingshot made of bank statements and receipt copies. And 6 miles away, my carefully engineered trap waited in the gathering darkness, weight sensors armed and cameras ready to document the most expensive shortcut attempt in Texas history. The metallic taste of anticipation mixed with the faint diesel smell drifting through the community center's open windows as everyone settled in for what would become the most dramatic HOA meeting in Willowbrook Estates history, showtime. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never seen drama like this. 200 residents packed into folding chairs, local TV news crews setting up cameras, and enough tension to power the building's lights without electricity. Sheriff's deputies flanked the exits like they were expecting trouble, which, frankly, they were. Delilah entered the room like she owned it, chin up, shoulders back, still playing the role of imperious HOA president. She'd changed into her most authoritative outfit, navy blazer, pearl necklace, the whole power lunch ensemble. But I could see sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning. Mrs. Patterson took the podium with shaking hands, her folder of evidence looking impossibly small against the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. Ladies and gentlemen, I've served as your HOA treasurer for 12 years, and I've never had to call an emergency meeting like this. Her voice wavered but grew stronger with each word. However, recent irregularities in our community finances require immediate attention and transparency. She started simple. Missing pool maintenance funds, phantom landscaping contracts, security upgrades that existed only on paper. The crowd murmured, confused but not yet angry. These seemed like accounting errors, not criminal fraud. Delilah stood up, attempting to regain control. Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate your diligence, but these are complex financial matters that require board-level discussion, not public speculation about... Sit down, Delilah. Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through the room like a blade. I'm not finished. That's when the real bombshell dropped. Mrs. Patterson produced bank statements showing direct transfers from HOA accounts to Delilah's personal mortgage payments. $15,000 here, $8,000 there, all disguised as legitimate community expenses but traceable to Delilah's personal accounts. The room erupted. Voices raised in anger, people standing up demanding explanations, and camera flashes from the news crews documenting every moment. The smell of nervous sweat mixed with industrial coffee from the community center's ancient machine. That's enough, Delilah shouted, her composure finally cracking. This is harassment. You people don't understand the complexities of community financial management. But County Attorney Williams had heard enough. He stood up from the back row, badge visible on his belt. Mrs. Thornwick, based on evidence presented here tonight and ongoing investigation, you're under arrest for felony embezzlement, fraud, and misappropriation of community funds. That's when Delilah made her final, fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering with whatever dignity remained, she bolted for the emergency exit like a spooked deer. The deputies moved to intercept, but she was surprisingly fast for someone in designer heels. I knew exactly where she was headed. Only one route led from the community center to the highway without going through downtown traffic. Straight through my ranch gate. My phone buzzed with motion sensor alerts as her BMW roared down the county road toward my property. The cameras activated automatically, night vision capturing her approach in crystal clear detail. She hit my driveway at full speed, probably doing 40 miles per hour, desperate to escape before the deputies could follow. The weight sensors triggered perfectly. 6,000 pounds of entitled desperation hit my carefully engineered false surface, and physics took over with brutal efficiency. The plywood gave way exactly as calculated, and that pristine white BMW dropped 6 feet into my pit with a sound like thunder crashing into earth. The anti-vehicle barriers deployed a split second later, steel posts rising from the pit floor to prevent any escape attempt. But they weren't necessary. The BMW was thoroughly immobilized, front end crumpled against the pit's sloped wall, engine smoking but thankfully not on fire. I was already on my way with emergency equipment when the deputies arrived, red and blue lights painting the night sky like a bizarre aurora. Delilah was conscious and screaming, mostly about her car, not her injuries, which told me the safety systems had worked perfectly. "Help! Someone help me! This is assault! He tried to kill me!" Sheriff Martinez looked down into the pit, then at me with barely concealed amusement. "Jake, I'm going to need you to explain this engineering project." "Well, Sheriff, Texas Property Code 75.001 allows reasonable force to protect property from criminal trespass," I said, echoing Rodriguez's legal advice. "I calculated the deceleration forces to stop intrusion without causing serious harm. As you can see, Mrs. Thornwick appears to be uninjured but definitely stopped. The fire department extracted her within 20 minutes, more embarrassed than hurt. Her BMW, however, was a total loss. $60,000 of German engineering reduced to expensive scrap metal by good old Texas ingenuity. But the real mic drop moment came when Martinez read her rights while she sat in the back of his patrol car. "Delilah Thornwick, you're under arrest for felony embezzlement, attempted flight to avoid prosecution, criminal trespass, and destruction of property. Oh, and ma'am, your pit stop just cost you any chance of making that flight to the Cayman Islands." The crowd of residents who'd followed from the community center gave me a standing ovation that echoed across 40 acres of Texas ranch land. Justice had finally found its target. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my front porch watching sunrise paint my pasture gold, coffee steam mixing with morning mist, and I can honestly say that sometimes the universe delivers justice with a sense of humor. Delilah Thornwick pleaded guilty faster than a tourist fleeing Texas heat, avoiding a trial that would have been more public than a Super Bowl halftime show. 3 years in state prison, full restitution of $240,000 plus penalties, and a felony record that'll follow her longer than cheap cologne. Her foreclosed mansion sold at auction for 60 cents on the dollar, every penny flowing to the HOA victims fund she'd tried so hard to drain. Garrison divorced her before the ink dried on her sentence, liquidated their assets, and vanished like morning dew. Last anyone heard, he was dodging SEC investigators in some offshore paradise, proving that karma sometimes works double shifts. The sweetest irony? That BMW she destroyed in my pit wasn't covered by insurance because she was mid-felony when physics intervened. $60,000 of German precision engineering reduced to expensive scrap metal because she couldn't respect a simple wooden gate. The transformation of Willowbrook Estates has been nothing short of miraculous. Mrs. Patterson became president by unanimous vote, implementing transparent financial reporting and actual community spirit. Her first presidential act established the Sarah Riverside Fund, legal aid for homeowners fighting HOA corruption nationwide. We've already helped 67 families across Texas battle board fraud, harassment campaigns, and illegal assessments. Turns out America is crawling with mini Delilahs, and they're all learning that regular folks bite back when cornered. My ranch is thriving like it hasn't since Sarah was alive. Civil lawsuit settlement, money-funded new facilities, improved infrastructure, and a booming agritourism operation. City folks pay premium rates to experience authentic ranch life, and I'm booked solid through next Christmas. That infamous pit became Austin legend before I filled it in for safety. I converted the area into a memorial pond with a brass plaque reading Delilah's Folly, where shortcuts end in consequences. Visitors love the story, though I always emphasize the legal engineering aspects of property protection. Tommy promoted me to senior electrician and uses my case in contractor seminars. Standing up for principles is the best business strategy, he tells other companies. Our phones ring constantly with clients who want to hire folks with actual backbones. The legal impact has been extraordinary. Texas legislature passed the Riverside Rule, mandating quarterly HOA audits, transparent fund management, and whistleblower protections for corruption reports. 5 other states have adopted similar legislation, creating a nationwide movement for accountability. Personal life has taken beautiful turns too. Mrs. Patterson's daughter Elena returned to Austin managing the Sarah Fund, and we've been dating for 4 months. She combines Sarah's gentle heart with a prosecutor's sharp mind, perfect for keeping me grounded while helping victims navigate legal mazes. My kids visit every weekend now, genuinely proud of their father's principled stand. They're planning to move back and expand ranch operations, marking the first time in decades that Riverside Ranch faces growth instead of mere survival. The Sarah Fund receives calls daily: California election fraud, Florida assessment schemes, Nevada board corruption. We're going national, building networks of advocates who understand that property rights form democracy's foundation. But my favorite moment arrives each morning when I check that gate where everything started. Proper lock, reinforced hinges, security cameras that probably qualify as overkill. More importantly, it represents something Delilah never grasped: the sacred right to protect what's yours. The gravel crunches confidently under my boots now, no longer angry, but assured. Sweet hay scent carries hope instead of diesel exhaust. Running weathered hands over 60-year-old wood, I feel generations of honest work protected for my grandchildren. The rough texture reminds me of Sarah's hands during her final days. Tough from decades of ranch work, but gentle with infinite love. She always said the best way to honor someone's memory is helping others find their strength. So here's my challenge. What's your worst HOA nightmare? Share it in the comments below. You're not fighting alone, and help is available. If this story proved that regular folks can still defeat corrupt systems, smash that subscribe button on Karen's Stories. We're building an army of people who refuse to be pushed around, one property rights victory at a time. Sometimes justice requires patience, planning, and the perfect pit trap, but it's always worth the engineering effort. Remember, they can steal your money, harass your family, and abuse their petty power. But they can't take your determination to fight back. Welcome to Karen's Stories, where entitled behavior meets consequences.